Is it right if we get a little personal?
Yeah, let's get personal.
All right, man. Sounds good. We heard your story about how you came to know Jesus. Tell us a little bit about life after that.
Okay, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit about life after that. Life became very hard, to be candid with you. So life became very hard. There were a lot of people who didn't understand. I had a fairly radical encounter with Jesus. It brought division. Jesus did not come to bring peace, but the sword. I understand what that means now. So it became tough. I lost some friends. I gained some friends. I would say a few months after I met Christ, that's when Allie and I reconnected. And, you know, we were married young. And so, you know, after meeting Christ, I wanted to get involved. I wanted to serve Jesus. I wanted to do some things. And it was very difficult for me to fit in church. There were a lot of people I felt like I couldn't relate to people. I thought everyone who went to church had their act together. I just didn't know. I struggled with, you know, I had a hard time. Even though I was delivered from a lot of things, I would still cuss sometimes in prayer, and it would just come out. And
that's all of us.
That's all of us, yeah. That's what Alicia was saying during the break, actually. You know, that's a joke for the recording. So I would say I struggled to fit into church. I never qualified to be a youth leader. We had a fairly stringent set of rules at the church I got plugged into, and I could just never qualify. And so I volunteered at a nursing home, became a chaplain at a nursing home, and haven't forgotten that. I miss those days, to be candid with you. Became a chaplain at a nursing home on Sundays and just wheeled all the residents down to the cafeteria and did church. And Allie would come and we would play. You guys remember cassette tapes? We would play Hosanna tapes for 20 minutes. Let God arise and his enemies be scattered, because I can't sing. And so we would play Hosanna, and then I would preach. Half of the stuff I would say wasn't in the Bible, I'm convinced. And but saw the first person healed in that nursing home, first person delivered from demons happened at that nursing home, and just saw God do some things, and started volunteering at a homeless shelter. So they had to listen to somebody give a little sermon before they ate their hot meal. So 70 men, it was a male shelter, 70 men on Sunday night. If they wanted their hot meal, they would come in. So I learned how to interact with people that I could relate to. Okay. So did that for a couple years, and then just sensed, like, if I don't tell people about Jesus the rest of my life, I'll die. And that's when we started the journey to try to figure out what it meant to be in ministry, even though ministry wasn't our goal. Sure. Just spreading the love of Jesus was. So that's kind of what it looked like. I don't know if I answered your question.
Absolutely. So let's go, I guess, a little further into the future now. Let's think back to the time to Heath, the youth pastor. All right, so pragmatically, just kind of, what did your week look like when you were a youth pastor? Let's talk about that for a minute.
All right, so what did my week look like? I would say there were a few things that never changed, and some things always changed. Okay. When I was a youth pastor, I really struggled with insecurity initially, because I'm just an intense person, or people tell me that, and this is who I am. And I just really thought there was something wrong with me, because I have just always been this way. And I really struggled and thought there's something wrong, that maybe God messed up. People would always say, man, you're way too intense. And I finally just realized I just need to be myself. And you guys understand. Just be yourself. So as a youth pastor, there were a few disciplines I folded into my life. The first youth group we had, or the first church we worked at, was a church plant. It was 60 people. We had 12 teenagers. We had no church building. And so those days looked a lot different. Those days involved, Heath, go to Walmart. We need grape juice for communion on Sunday. To get the oil changed in the church van. To I need you to go follow up on the first-time visitors. And I'd go play basketball with young people. Go to school and eat lunch with them. And, duct tape a flashlight to the ceiling with extension cords, because we couldn't afford lights. So I would duct tape flashlights to the ceiling so I could have a little ambiance. And that's what we would do. And I had $500 a year. That was our youth budget. I remember our first year, we spent the entire youth budget to go to a Jeannie Mayo conference.
Nice.
Where Jeannie Mayo preached on Rizpah. You guys have heard about Rizpah, right? And cords of light. And I remember walking into that facility thinking, oh my word, like this is huge. People actually have seats with cushion in their youth room. She has youth leaders and they all wear the same t-shirts. This is amazing. And on the way home, Allie and I were talking. I'll never forget it. We were just talking about what would God have for us. The reason why we were impressed with what Jeannie did is because Jeannie did what God put in her heart. Let's do what God puts in our heart. And so we began to fold some disciplines into our youth ministry. We started prayer meeting. For as long as I can remember, every time we were youth pastors, we devoted one night a week to prayer. There were times nobody would show up. And then there were times 150, 200 would show up. So we would have prayer meeting. As a youth pastor, I developed the discipline of fasting. You know, I don't underestimate how powerful it is to just be lovesick for Jesus. I used to read 1 to 2 books a week. I did that for probably 15 years, and then recently had to stop that because I was in school, so the reading looked a bit different. But I would read 1 to 2 books a week. Try to memorize a verse a day in the early days. Got a lot of the word hidden away in my heart. It's not because I'm smart, it's just because I wanted to memorize the Bible. Spent a lot of time with parents. I tried to get my senior pastor's heart, followed my pastor around, wanted to know his vision, wanted to make sure I didn't have a church within a church, wanted to make sure I helped fulfill my pastor's vision with a unique expression that God had, placed in us as well. Some of the things that continued as our youth group situation changed, evolved, and grew, and all that stuff would be on Wednesday afternoons. I would always pray Wednesday afternoon. So I tried to plan well in advance, and I just devote Wednesday afternoon to pray. Just maybe take 4 or 5 hours and just pray, walk around the sanctuary, pray in tongues, and just believe God. Try to ask God to show me things. Is there any, so I would do that. And I would say I made a ton of mistakes. I did some really stupid things as a youth pastor. I'm having a flashback of all these memories.
That's actually my next question. What's the most boneheaded thing you ever did?
Yeah, man, I did so many dumb things, for real. My first day on the job as a youth pastor, I got a speeding ticket in the church van. And my pastor was so mad. I was crying on my way back to the little shop. I was convinced I'm going to get fired. I mean, I got a speeding ticket in the church van with teenagers in the van, okay? In a small town where everybody knows everybody. And so I remember one time I was preaching a sermon on gossip. And I thought, you know what? I want to have a good illustration. So I duct taped. Thank God for duct tape. I duct taped. Do you guys remember camcorders? This was back in the day before GoPros and before like all this stuff. I had little video cameras duct taped into the corners of the room. And what I did is I thought, I'm going to stage an arrest during my youth service, and I want to capture people talking to one another, and then I'm going to get up and say, okay, now how many of you were like making judgments about what just happened? What were you saying to your neighbor? And so I thought, okay, this is going to be good. So during worship, everything's going. I staged it perfect. I talked to the sheriff, the county sheriff who attended our church. I said, I need you to show up in full uniform. I need you to pack heat. Come on Wednesday night during worship, I want you walking down the middle aisle, okay, at such and such time. So I get up there. If this is sacrilegious, I'm sorry, but I get up there, and everybody's worshiping God, and all of a sudden, Officer Bill comes walking. I almost said his full name. I need to be careful. He comes walking down the center aisle, and you see hands begin to drop as everybody's worshiping, and heads turn, and everybody stares at him. And I had instructed him to arrest a young man who always got in trouble. Like every camp, every convention, he was the punk that always got in trouble, and everybody's going to think this is legit. So I need you to arrest such and such. I want you to read him his rights in the youth group. And so I told the young man, this is what's happening, okay? So Officer Bill walks up. You have the right to remain silent. He puts him in cuffs. People are freaking out. People are talking at one another. And Officer Bill escorts them out of the room. Everybody's talking. I've got the sound crew, knows what's going on. This is perfect. And all of a sudden I hear, "No!" And I realized his mom, who was a youth leader, I forgot to tell her what was happening. So she screams and she goes running out of the room. And then all of a sudden I hear this. His sister was on the worship team. She starts crying, drops the mic on the floor, goes running after her mom. There's pandemonium in the sanctuary. And how many of you know that news travels fast in church on Wednesday night? One of the deacons comes through the back door. Somehow somebody told my pastor. I forgot to tell my pastor what I was doing. So I forgot to tell the parents. I forgot to tell my pastor. I completely forgot to tell everybody. And it didn't turn out well. Okay? That was the illustration that went too far. So I remember one time, you guys remember maybe you guys still do the human videos, where like every good human video has to have a kid that looks like a demon with hook'em horns, right? So I want all the hook'em horns to come out at the right time, and I'm preaching.
We don't hook'em horns here.
I'm hook'em horns. I'm preaching about going to hell and going to heaven, and one day we're going to stand before God. And so I spent good money on a real wood gavel, and I've got this huge gavel, judge's gavel, and I'm talking about like one day God's going to pick up the gavel, and you need to be ready. And I've got this big gavel in my hand, and I'm doing this, and I'm excited, and I'm preaching, and I'm waxing the elephant, and all of a sudden the head of the gavel goes flying off of the handle and hits a young kid named Kalen in the face on the front row, and he starts bleeding all over the place. What do you do when Kalen gets hit in the head by the gavel and he's bleeding everywhere? I just kept preaching. I gave an altar call, and that night that young man responded. I swear he had blood all over his face when he came forward. So anyway, I've got dozens of stories like that.
That's awesome. We should have done the police illustration in Lawton. I think that would have probably gone over well. Awesome, man. Well, let's go back to just talking about generations for just a minute. I know you've been studying on that, and that's what you've been doing at the University of London. There's a trend that I've seen with every university or every generation from all the way to the Depression era to Generation Z. And one thing that you see is the current generation always blames the generation before. Where do you feel like between, you can say Gen Xers or millennials, where was the ball dropped between millennials and what's now going to be Generation Z, or any of those generations? Because that's what people tend to blame, is they say, somebody dropped the ball here. Can you think of anything specifically that you think in your mind, okay, this is where the ball was dropped?
Yeah, I would say that's a product of the sinful nature, and that started in Genesis 3 when Adam said, "The woman you gave me." Gotcha. Lord, the woman you gave me. Who told you you were naked? The woman you gave me. Yeah. I think it's a product of sinful nature to always blame people and to not accept responsibility. So what happens when a land is devoted to lawlessness? We fall prey to the lies of the evil one. Somebody once said, this quote isn't original with me, it came from somebody, I don't know who said it, but somebody said that whatever you tolerate will dominate. Yeah. So I think it's a product of sinful nature. A few practical things. Let's see here. Millennials would be known for their idealism, and when you're idealistic, you don't deal with issues. Gen Xers are known for their skepticism and cynicism. When you're cynical, you blame everybody. So Xers blamed everybody. Millennials were idealistic. And most people would say Gen Z is pragmatic. So I would say if there's ever going to be, according to what sociologists say, and God can do anything, sure, but Gen Z is probably going to be able to deal with all of the facts and come to a rational conclusion on their own instead of necessarily blaming people. And I think a lot of that's because of their desire to see authenticity come to the surface. So I think Gen Xers were cynical. Millennials were idealistic. Where did we drop the ball? I would say in the church world, I would say in the church world, when we were reaching Gen Xers, that's when we became skeptical of the supernatural and we became seeker sensitive. And when it comes to millennials, I think what we've done is we have made it possible to have a really good service without Jesus coming. Yeah. And so that's where we dropped the ball. I would say the pattern worth emulating is to create an environment where anybody can come and they feel loved and welcomed. But let's not apologize for the fact that we place more emphasis on a God we don't see than on anything in the world we do see. We are spiritual beings who live in a body. I think it's imperative that we don't apologize for what we really believe to be true. Yeah. So let's be Pentecostal people. And being Pentecostal means, it doesn't mean that we're weird, but it doesn't mean we're out of our mind. It does mean we're out of their mind.
That's right.
And God can give you a word for somebody. And one of my favorite stories about my wife is some friends of ours a few years ago got locked out of their business-like computers, and it was time to do taxes. If memory serves me right, I think I'm getting these details right. It was time to do taxes, and they literally couldn't access their tax documents. And it was down to the wire, and they were going to have to pay a boatload of penalties. And Allie just said to the lady, hey, let's pray. And God gave Allie a word of knowledge, a password. And she said, why don't you go home and try this? And it's like, that can't be it. That's never been the password. Just go ahead and try it. She went home and tried it, and it worked. Wow. Okay, so let's not apologize for being supernaturally focused. Let's just be the people of God and do all that. So that's what I would say.
Awesome, awesome. Hey, do we have any other questions that maybe something was sprung that you guys would like to ask? Awesome.
Can I address something?
Absolutely.
You're a new DYD. You and Alicia. And if I could just take a few minutes. Of course. I would say, first of all, thank you for inviting Allie and I to be here. Thanks for trusting us with this is like your first event. And I really appreciate it. I'm really honored that you had the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, Heath, we want to go a different direction. For whatever reason, you chose to allow us to come. So thank you for trusting us with your people. Absolutely. And thanks for allowing us to be here. Being a DYD is not easy because you start to lead a group of people who used to be your peers. And I want to encourage you and you, Alicia, to just be yourself, because the Lord will anoint who you are. There's a reason why a transition has just taken place. I love Doug. I love Jill. They're good friends of all of ours. But we also know that God is the God of seasons. Yeah. And that when a season ends and a new season begins, that there's a sovereign reason why. And Oklahoma needs what is in you. So we give you permission to tear down some bronze serpents. We give you permission to make changes. I love that you are inviting somebody to your convention and you say, whoever it was is Pentecostal. I love that you're wanting to prioritize the move of God and the presence of God. And so for whatever it is that's in you and that's in you, you just chase and pursue the dream that God has for you. And you have permission to make changes. You have permission to be yourself. You have permission to say no. And I agree emphatically, the greatest days of the church and the Assemblies of God in Oklahoma are not behind their head. Now, that being said, I say to you guys what I wish somebody would have said to the leaders that we had the opportunity to serve when we became DYDs and then became National Youth Director. There is an element of spiritual warfare that is very real. And one of the best things you can do for your leaders is to pray and fast for them. And I know you've heard Heath say he wants to serve you. You know, hey, if we can ever do anything for you, I think it would be great if they always knew that you feel the same way about them. And I'd encourage you, this is an idea actually Allie came up with once, I'd encourage you to create a calendar And maybe somebody today could take responsibility for this, create a calendar, and maybe you take a day a month and pray and or fast or do both for their family. And for little Lincoln, don't leave out Lincoln. Pray and fast for them to give them permission to change things. Because the reality is sometimes in leadership we say, hey, you know what, you better just take a year or two before you change anything. I'm going to tell you something. No, I think sometimes you need to change things within a few weeks. So let's give them permission to change things. If you have something you don't like, instead of coming to them with a problem, don't express a problem unless you have a solution. And if you disagree with me, I mean, I'm not the leader here. So bring it, but if there's a problem, bring a solution, not just a problem. Because in roles like this, it's not easy. And you immediately become the bullseye for people who want to share everything that needs to change. And sometimes encouragement and good news is hard to find. Don't judge them as they lead from a distance. Don't assume that if they're at youth convention and Heath walks past you and he doesn't say hi, that he's now, stuck on himself because he's the DYD. No, he just had something to do. So let's give them the benefit of the doubt and the grace they deserve, and let's pray and fast for them, and let's just believe that God is going to use them to usher Oklahoma and the Assemblies of God into a new realm, a new dimension of biblical literacy, yes, but spiritual literacy as well, that young people will be called to business, called to education, called into the ministry, called to give their lives wherever that may be, called to be good husbands, good wives, good fathers, good mothers, whatever it may be, and that Oklahoma will be known as being a well of revival. And if that's going to happen, it's going to happen because you guys and your leaders pay a price. I want to ask you to pray and fast for them. I want to ask you to encourage them. When it comes to thank you cards, some of the loneliest times of our life were at the district office. Actually, the loneliest time of our life was the district office and national office. Sometimes people forget that a word of encouragement can actually go a long way. So you drive to meet them. Invite them to your youth group. And invite them into your world. Because now their rhythm is changing. They're no longer going to interact with the same people every week. And now community is going to be a commodity for them. And the rhythm of relationships isn't necessarily going to be there. And so it's up to you guys to make sure that they know that just like they want to serve you and help you, that they know that you're here to help them and you're for them. You're not against them. You're rooting for them. You're cheering them on. And wouldn't it be amazing if another revival started in the United States and it started right here in Oklahoma? Because everybody in this room is all together and in one accord. Amen. Right? So I want to bless you. I just want to pray over you. Is there anything you want to say, dear? Okay. I just want to pray over Heath and Alicia, if that's okay. And I want to honor you. If you don't mind coming, I want to honor you guys for your leadership. I want to honor you for your desire to serve. And Allie, do you want to come and pray with me? And if you guys want, let's just pray over them. Let's just kind of commission them. I don't know how this works. If you want to get up and you want to come and pray for them, you can. If you want to sit there, do whatever. But I just want to pray over them.